And I admitted that I swing both ways, but I haven't had a Mac in a long time.
Hannah, you just did that on air.
And out of context, it sounds really horrible, too. We're talking about computer systems.
Sure you are. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio number 61, Guilty Until Proven Innocent, with our special guest, Mark Pearson. I am your host, Brian, and I'm joined by Hannah Wallen, and hopefully Dr. Randall McCann will be on a little bit later. And our special guest is Mark Pearson, who's going to be appearing at the ICMI next week, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, how are you, Mark? Aside from probably a little bit, did you learn a lot about computers in our little adventure?
Something.
Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about Mark's legal battle that's in the short of it. First, I'm going to set up with a little bit of a write-up that was given to us by one of our contributors. So if I got this wrong, or if there's anything that you want to add after I'm done reading, Mark, just let me know. Okay? All right. Mark Pearson, a London commuter, has been cleared of sexually assaulting Game of Thrones actress Soad Fares. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right. At the Waterloo train station in December of 2014, after a jury of his peers threw out claims that the alleged crime took place after only 90 minutes of deliberation. Pearson was accused of brushing against Fares and then sexually assaulting her by penetration. However, CCTV footage from the station showed that Pearson had walked past Fares without breaking stride whilst carrying a newspaper in one hand and holding onto the strap of his bag in the other. According to Pearson, he had endured a year-long Kafkaesque nightmare as a result of the accusation, claiming the Crown Prosecution Service for the charge. I would have had to crouch down, put my hand up the woman's skirt, penetrate her, and then take my hand out again, all while holding a newspaper and walking along the concourse, he said. It's preposterous. It is against everything I believe in. I did nothing wrong. So what happened? Considering that there was no report of witnesses, no report of forensic evidence, and that Fares failed to pick out Pearson in an identity parade of video images, this case has raised some serious questions about the CPS's decision-making ability when it comes to incidents of sexual assault. When questioned about these issues, a CPS spokesman responded, there was sufficient evidence for this case to proceed to court and to progress to trial. We respect the decision of the jury. Yet, at the same time, Pearson says the CPS haven't said why they continue to pursue the case, even after we had an expert look at the CCTV and conclude that I couldn't have possibly done what she said. So once again, we end with a high-profile rape case based on false allegations. And as Julia Hartley Brewer correctly points out in her article in The Telegraph, the Director of Public Prosecutions must realize that she is not doing sexual assault victims any favors by bringing cases like Mr. Pearson's to court. Victims of rape and sexual assault want sex attackers to be brought to justice, not the pointless persecution of innocent men who just happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, Mr. Pearson, does that...
Can I just start by saying I can neither confirm nor deny the person that you mentioned as the actress. I'm not allowed to say who the person was, so I'm not going to say that that is the person. That's the law here in Britain, and if I say who the actress is, I could be in big trouble.
So okay, well that's fair. So you can't, because of the laws in Britain, you can't. Is it because there's something about naming the accuser, or is it because of the fact that
the accuser will be protected for life? I'm not allowed to say who she is, even though I'm not guilty.
That is interesting.
I'm threatened with imprisonment for naming her.
Yeah, I think that's part of the rape shield laws. And they differ in different countries, but it's pretty much standard that victims, or alleged victims are protected. So accusers are protected because it's just assumed that if they've made an accusation, they're victims. But even when they find out the accuser's not a victim, most times it continues to get followed and their name is not released.
I mean, apparently she could still claim compensation. She could still claim money, even though I was found not guilty.
See, now that's insane. Because, like, once you are found not guilty for the reason that you were found not guilty, it's conclusively demonstrated that she lied.
Yeah. But technically she is still a victim. Which, it makes no sense.
Yeah. So, could you tell us a little bit about, because this has been going on since 2014.
Yeah.
Ms. Pearson, could you tell us a little bit about what you, like, how this sort of happened and what your experience was for this amount of time?
The first I knew was on the 5th of February 2014. I was arrested by a group of policemen, 6 guys. They call a Trojan team, and it's their job to pick up wanted people. I was wanted for a month without even knowing it. My picture had been posted online, and I had no idea. And the first thing I knew was when they turned up at my door and arrested me. And then I was taken to a police station and interviewed and processed. They took my DNA and put me in a cell, and I had to wait for a solicitor to arrive to be interviewed.
How long were you in the cell?
Must have been about 3 hours.
Oof. And
The solicitor said they had to get a duty solicitor to come, so that took time. And he advised me to say nothing. He just said say no comment, which I wasn't happy with, because in TV programs, it's always the villain that says no comment. It just makes you sound guilty, like you've got something to hide, and I had nothing to hide. So I was cooperating as you would. I'd assumed that I'd been mistaken for somebody else. In the end, I mean, it took 4 months for me to actually see the CCTV. I wasn't shown that in the interview. I was just shown a very blurry image, the one that they'd posted online, which it looked like me, and I said it looks like me, but I couldn't be 100% sure. And they took that as a denial that it was me, as though I was denying that it was me in the image. But I just couldn't be 100% certain. I mean, I don't think anyone could.
Yeah. And this went on, well, it looks like it's been sort of going on for a couple years now. Did your professional or personal, was your professional personal life affected by that? If you can talk about that. I'm not sure what is and not, what is considered off board.
I'm lucky because I'm an artist, so most of my work is self-employed. It wasn't a problem with my employer. I have a part-time job, but they knew me very well, and they knew I wouldn't do anything like that, so that wasn't a problem. But it's just the completely bizarre experience of it, just being arrested, not knowing why, not being told the whole truth of the incident. As I say, I didn't even see the CCTV footage until months after I was arrested, so I didn't even know what I was supposed to have done. All I was told it was that I'd sexually assaulted a woman in Waterloo Station, and I knew I hadn't. So it's bizarre that you're put in that situation of having to defend an accusation, and you can't, because you're not given any information to defend yourself with. All you can do is say, "I know I haven't done that." What else can you say in that situation? You're presumed guilty until you can prove that you're innocent, which is totally wrong. That's the opposite of what it should be.
Yes, exactly.
Something that's happened in police work over the last few decades is that they've had to change from their investigation being about getting to the bottom of things, getting to the truth, to their investigation being about finding a way to convict the first person that they decide is a potential perpetrator.
Yeah.
And that's why they don't provide you with any information. They're looking for you to trip up in some way or another. And the less information they provide you, especially like if you were guilty, the more likely you'd be to know something that you wouldn't have any way of knowing if you hadn't committed the crime and things like that. And they use all kinds of tricks like that. But they still manage to trip up people who didn't do anything using those same tricks.
Yeah. I mean, with me, there was nothing. They had no evidence. You know, they did an ID parade and she didn't pick me out. There was just nothing at all. And yet it still went to trial, which is crazy.
Well, and what's really mind-blowing is that the only way they could possibly have you know, decided that it was you was from looking at that same footage. They had to have looked at that footage and seen that it was impossible for her to have done what, or for you to have done what she said you did.
Mm-hmm. And not only that, but I didn't fit her description. You know, she said it was somebody who was 6'2", very tall, much taller than all the other people around, and which is how she saw this person apparently, because he made eye contact with her. And she said the guy had hair. I don't have hair. I'm bald. So why the police thought it was me, I've no idea. Maybe I was the only one they could trace because I had an Oyster card, a travel card on the Underground.
It could
Perhaps.
be.
What
It
do you-
could be that you were the closest to a made-up description. I mean, that sounds like a made-up description of somebody that doesn't exist, and
Yeah.
you were probably the easiest guy to try to match to that.
But why did they automatically assume that what she was saying was the truth? Why not even question what she's saying?
Well, I think Hannah can probably go into that better than I can.
And that's been something that there's been certain entities pushing for, mostly feminist groups pushing for in law enforcement in numerous countries for years, decades actually. And it's something that they started with. I know they started with it in the United States about 30, 40 years ago in the 70s, and they began questioning the accuser's story, like not believing actual victims, rather than trying to get to the bottom of things, trying to find out the truth and so on. And the idea that some women might lie about being sexually assaulted as an attack on women rather than a fact about human beings. As a whole, human beings lie about everything. There are some human beings that lie about everything, and that's not going to be an exception. But there's this history of feminist activists who have fought very hard to get both domestic violence and sexual violence law to act on a presumption of guilt rather than a presumption of innocence, to act as if evidence is not necessary for the crime to be proved, and to act as if any questioning of the accuser is an attack on women instead of an interest in the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the United States, the Violence Against Women Act actually has written into its text that there's training that the federal government pays for to teach police and prosecutors and court personnel and everybody to follow that feminist standard where they're presuming guilt first, they're having a lower standard for evidence for them believing the accuser, and so on, right off the bat. So your police in your area may have the same thing, and the law's probably got a different name, but it'll be a similar law, because once they got that through in the United States, they pushed it everywhere else. And they're pushing it. They're still widening that to new countries. They're pushing that in India. They're pushing it even in the Middle East now. So you may have training that the officers who arrested you went through, where their job was to assume that you were guilty.
And that's exactly what happened. But then they put here, I don't know what the system is in America, but here they pass that information on to the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, and they're supposed to look at the evidence and look at whether that should go to trial or whether charges should be applied or whether it should just be thrown out. You know, in my case, it just went right the way through the process. And I've looked at the CPS guidelines, and they're not even supposed to charge if there isn't enough evidence. You know, they're supposed to have more than a 50% chance of a prosecution. And in my case, no way was that there.
Well, I was just thinking, what kind of evidence could there have been? The only thing I think that we have, at least from what I've read, is the accusation,
Yeah.
and that's it. The videotape there were, I don't know if it was video or photographs. All I was able to find were photographs, but
Yeah, it was a sequence of video stills. So, I mean, that was evidence in my favor. So the evidence
yeah.
that they did have was contradicting what she's saying. So I don't understand why the CPS didn't take that into account. And it just doesn't make sense what they did.
Well, it's possible that, like, if you have an equivalent to the Violence Against Women Act, one of the other things that the Violence Against Women Act does is it, you know, what is police policy in other instances? Like, if you were talking about a robbery, if you were talking about vandalism, if you were talking about somebody breaking into somebody's house or arson or anything like that, the policy is pretty much unified as to how they approach the case. But any case where the Violence Against Women Act applies, the policy changes, and they're expected to do things per that policy that they would not be allowed to do in these other cases. And one of those is to pursue cases that they would not pursue if it were something like burglary or arson or theft or anything else like that.
I'm just curious, Mark, were you able to actually face your accuser or meet them or talk to them at all?
No, not at all. She was in court, but she was behind a curtain. I saw her hand because the judge asked her to touch the rail of the curtain to show how long the sexual assault was supposed to have taken place. And she held her hand there for about 3 seconds, which kind of totally contradicted what evidence was already there, the fact that I'd taken half a second to walk past her, so it was just bizarre.
They had her behind a curtain?
Oh,
That's
yeah.
so strange. Like, I mean...
dated her. Like I wasn't being intimidated by being put in court, you know.
Was that supposedly the reason? Is because she was, so she wouldn't have to experience seeing you? It was like, that was like her safe space?
The strange thing is, she nearly bumped into me in the corridor because they brought her in through a door, and I happened to be walking in the same corridor, but it was about 3 seconds after she'd walked in, so we just missed each other. But
I just didn't think that. I figured that when it came to the law, and I know that you can't, say the name or whatever, but I thought that, well, not to. I know that it's going to sound naive, but one would think that in the eyes of the law, when you're, appearing in court, when you're going through the legal process, there is no amount of clout that should protect you in that way, where you can literally hide your identity. You don't have to face anyone. You can be put like as though you were some kind of sheik behind a curtain. Like, she may as well have been on a palanquin or something, and was able to essentially make a testimony from there. I mean, why wasn't she just, have one of those voice modulators so that she sounds like, like a man or something, with it, and have like a silhouette while she makes her testimony. It's weird.
Well, we were kind of lucky to have her there at all because apparently she'd been working in the morning, filming, and she didn't really want to come to court. She was very busy that week, and you'd think, if something had happened to her, she'd want to be there, but it was postponed till the afternoon.
Yeah, that's actually a sign right there of a false accuser not wanting to go through with court. And, I know a lot of feminists will say it's because they feel like they're not going to be believed, but I think it's the other way around. I think they feel like they're not going to be believed very often when they're false accusers, or if they've been lied to a lot by feminists.
Mm.
But if you've got a case and you've got proof, and you're sure that you're going to go in there and get some justice for what was done to you, you want to go to court.
Yeah.
You don't want to stay home. You don't want to go to work. You want to go to court.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. I mean, when I think about um, this idea that she could conceal her identity as she's making an accusation while she's in court, it's almost a way of protecting. I don't think it's so much a way of protecting her from being exposed to, the person that she's accusing, her I don't know, predator or whatever, the man who supposedly damaged her, more than in so much as it is essentially a way of protecting herself and her reputation and her career if she's wrong, if this like goes badly for her. It just seems, I don't know, like that's just the first I've heard of that. That's so odd and kind of sinister that someone can make an accusation of someone else for no reason, out of the blue, that has absolutely without any evidence, get that person arrested, detained, and have it drag on for years, right? From 2014 to well, at least a year and some change.
It was a year, yeah.
Yeah, and then still no one, and then have like a legal binding thing on top of that says we can never name this person, or at least you can't. So she's safe, from all responsibility and accountability for that.
Nobody in Britain can name her.
No one in Britain can name her. Holy shit! That's insane. That's crazy. Okay. So I was told to reach out to you thanks to Aaron Pitsey, who I had on an interview a
Very
few
good friend, Aaron.
and I understand that Aaron came to help you. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about? How did she reach out to you? How did you guys find each other? And where did you go from there?
Okay, we have a mutual friend because I'm an artist, and a friend of mine lived a few doors down from Erin, so knew Erin for years, and she introduced me to Erin, knowing what had happened to me, which was very fortunate. It was kind of a coincidence, and Erin's been so helpful to me. She put me in touch with other people that could help, and the journalist that came to the trial, she put me in touch with him. I just wanted to get it out there into the public domain, what was happening, not just to me, but to other people. So Erin's been a godsend to me. She was great.
And in what ways was Aaron able to help you out? What she
Well,
do?
as I say, she put me in touch with a journalist. He came every day to the trial because I was just worried that it would just disappear into the ether. The fact that he came every day, he was very interested in the subject, and the fact that it was a well-known actress was kind of helpful for him. It gave him more of an angle on the story.
Mm. Well, that's awesome. And I guess since there was so much hush hush around identities of the people involved with the case, did this case get a lot of media attention in the UK outside of that reporter?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, once that story was published on the Sunday following the verdict, it just went global. Then the story went all over the world, and it was published in most of the British newspapers. Although a couple of TV channels and a couple of newspapers just ignored it, but what can you do?
Did you ever feel like, because this is something I'm curious about, a lot of times when men are falsely accused of sexual assault or rape, while the trial is still ongoing or the case is still being investigated or whatever, there is genuine danger in the form of mob justice. People who believe that you're guilty And a lot of times, like when you think about the stuff that's happened on college campuses where there were false accusations, Duke Lacrosse and some of the other ones, those students, they may have been cleared of the charges, but their social life was, it was devastated, and their academic future was ruined too. They were expelled or they were thrown out of school. Did you have any of those things happen, or did you?
No, I was very fortunate in that respect, and I know how lucky I was in that nobody knew about what was happening until the actual trial, and even then it wasn't kind of known about until the verdict, and then the journalist published the story. I mean, I was worried about turning up at the trial, whether some of her relatives or friends would be there. Um, in the end, nobody she knew was there. There was nobody on her side there at all, except for I think a friend of hers turned up on the last day to hear the verdict, but that was it. Nobody else that she knew was there. So that was good in for me, in my respect.
Huh. Is
But
this?
I've heard so many other stories of other people that have gone through similar experiences, but they have had, mobs or people intimidating them, or mostly stuff being posted online, and not so much kind of people turning up on doorsteps.
Yeah, it was like more bite than bark, huh? Or more bark than bite, rather. Got that backwards. Um, I had another question and I lost it. Yeah, you're right though. You are really lucky.
Well,
And
that's why I went ahead and publicized it, because I was in a position to. I wasn't. I mean, it was so blatantly obvious that it wasn't true, that I was in a good position to publicize other stories or what was happening to other people through my own story. And that's all I've tried to do since. Just to show how ludicrous the system is. If they're going to arrest somebody just going home from work, walking past somebody in half a second, then you end up in court.
What's really sad about this is not only, you didn't just have to prove like that she couldn't prove your guilt in order to be able to do that. You had to be able to prove your innocence, which, I mean, it's pretty obvious, that you could not have done what she accused. That
Yeah.
it's not physically possible for it to have taken place. But it has to be a situation that extreme before a guy can come out and say, look, this is happening and I can prove it here, without having, media and feminist groups and other people come out and say, well, maybe you're lying. Well, no, it's obvious this time she is.
Yeah. I mean, it was why Erin encouraged me to publicize it, because it was, in some ways, it was the perfect case to kind of put forward. It had a bit of celebrity interest in there as well, which kind of drove it further. So it was, I felt I had no choice but to publicize it, really. I mean, people have asked me if I thought I was doing the right thing, but I felt like I didn't have a choice in it.
hmm. I
I'll be
was.
honest, I think it was the best choice simply because of what I've seen with people I know that have been falsely accused and what they've gone through and the doubt that's left behind.
Yeah, I mean, for me, having it on
Really,
record and having it on the internet means that if I in the future need to go for a job or something like that, it will be blatantly obvious to anyone that looks online that it wasn't true. Because, I mean, my name will always be on record, on the police records, as having been charged with this offence. I'm not completely innocent in that respect. I mean, I still haven't tried travelling. I'm curious to see what happens when I try and go to America, whether I get turned back. Because as far as they're
now see,
concerned,
that's something that needs to be reformed. If
yeah,
you are tried for a crime and you are acquitted,
yeah,
especially when you're acquitted because the evidence makes it obvious that you not only didn't commit the crime, but you physically couldn't have committed the crime. The accusation was not even a mistake; it was obviously fabricated.
mm,
That anything to do with that would impact on you should have no record. There should be no record that, other than acquittal, to prove that you were acquitted, if it comes up that you were accused, there should be no record that an employer could find or that should affect your ability to travel or anything like that.
Yeah, but as far as the CPS are concerned, I wasn't found innocent. I was just found not guilty, which is slightly different. It means that they didn't have sufficient evidence to prove that I was guilty. So their average statement at the end of any trial like this is to say they respect the decision of the jury. We think there was sufficient evidence for this to go to trial. We respect the decision.
Well, now see, that's different from in the U.S. Although I think there's still legal maneuvering that has to take place in the U.S. to actually get your record to reflect if you've been acquitted. But I don't believe our legal system considers you, not guilty means not guilty. It means you are innocent. Once you're acquitted, you're innocent in the United States.
Yeah, it's slightly different here, I think.
Now, does your legal system still have guilty until proven innocent then, as your standard?
In this respect, yes, I was guilty until I could prove that I wasn't guilty, or a jury could say that I wasn't guilty. But it's not quite the same as being completely innocent. I mean, as I say, my case is still on record. I was taken to trial. I was charged. I was acquitted, but that's it. That's as far as it goes. I wasn't given an apology. I wasn't given
Of course not.
anything.
And do you have, in the UK, do you have things like sex offender lists,
Yeah.
registries and
If I'd
stuff?
found guilty, I would have been put on a register.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that some of the guys I was talking about in the U.S. that were falsely accused were put on the registry.
Yeah.
And even though they were found not guilty, I think they're still, in some of those cases, they're still on there, and they have to go through a whole different set of channels to be removed from that list.
Yeah.
So they may as well be guilty, because people who are looking to live in the area, that want to know who's a sex offender in the town, if they want to find a job, this is all going to follow them, for a large part of their life. And
Yeah.
the fact that we don't have any, we don't hold any false accusers accountable. We have, as far as I know, there's nothing in place for that. Then this gives people, free rein to do it, especially if they're women. I mean, I think, almost exclusively if they're women, if they choose to. So.
There's a story over here at the moment of a guy who was found not guilty of an S&M sex offence, and even though he was found not guilty, he has to register with the police and let them know 24 hours in advance when he's going to have sex.
I read about that guy. Yep, I read about that guy. He can't have any spontaneous liaisons with anybody. He can't. No one night stands, no hooking up, because he has to tell them a day in advance. Yeah, and it's like, this is a situation where the police have license to do something there that I don't think any police here in the United States actually have without a domestic violence order.
I don't even
And that is
how that's legal
to
here.
give behavioral orders like that. Yeah. And there was something that I saw in law that in English law that actually legalizes that, where if they deem you a danger to the public, they're allowed to give you orders as to what behavior you may or may not engage in. And there's no hearing for it. There's no due process, basically. You have no right to contest it.
Yeah. This reminds me of, because this goes far and beyond a regular sort of, when we've come across false accusations where a woman and a man have either had, usually it's consensual sex, like in the case with, Gian Gomeshi or Emma Sulkowicz, the mattress girl, where, sex was not only consensual, it was reciprocal, and on top of that, there was either more sex or requests for more. I believe that Emma Sulkowicz was, she was tweeting the man that she had sex with after it happened, or not tweeting, I'm sorry, texting him, requesting more sex, just like the woman who accused Gian Gomeshi. And you could at least, you knew that there was sex involved between the two parties, or in cases where there was a stripper or there people were drunk at the time or whatever. But with this is starkly different because you literally were, going about your business, and a woman made an accusation, had all kinds of bad info, and it was still enough to put you through all that, and you didn't even touch her. You didn't even know who that person was, I imagine, at the time. You didn't, so that...
You have to recognize, you wouldn't recognize her, she just... Although she's a well-known actress, she's not that well-known, so you wouldn't know.
Right. So, I mean, you would, it's like you... it could have been anyone, essentially. Anybody could have had the finger pointed at them, and they wouldn't have even had known the person accusing them, had spoken to them in passing, had even brushed up against them, real or imagined, and they would have gone through that process. And it reminds me of an artist, a woman named Ilma Gore. She is a Australian-American artist that lives in Los Angeles. She's best known for she made a painting of Donald Trump because she disagrees with him with a micro penis. And you know about this person?
Yeah, I've seen the painting.
Okay. Okay. So she does these performance art things and all kinds of stuff. And one of her projects was called Human Canvas, where she allowed people to use her body as a medium. Basically, she let people tattoo her that she didn't know, and part of it, people wrote their names, they wrote marriage proposals, love letters, etc. And it was an art piece that was about consent in some way. So she's very involved with all of this sort of feminist stuff. She identifies as gender fluid, and but anyway, the reason why I bring her up is she made a claim that people just ran with, that one day, this is her story, one day she was walking down the street minding her own business, and a muscle car full of Trump supporters pulled over on the street, and one of the guys jumped out and said Trump 2016 and punched her in the face, and then got back in the car and drove off. And every publication that thought this was an opportunity printed it and accepted it as absolute truth. And she had photos of herself with bruises on her face, but absolutely no evidence that this had actually happened in the way that she said it. But the point is that she was able to tell a story because she wanted to spin a narrative, or she wanted to. It may have happened the way she said. I'm not saying that it's not, but all of it sounds super fishy. I don't personally believe it. The point is that she was able to make the claim and then have it become reality in the eyes of the media and anyone who read it, who partook of the media with the intention of believing what they were reading. And I'm reminded of that in a way because it's one of those things where she can do that and there'll be absolutely no accountability for it. In the same way that this actress did this to you, and she actually made sure that even though everyone knows who this person is, they all have to pretend they don't know and they can't talk about it, and we have to kind of play along, and it's really just weird and twisted and just bizarre.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like that here, because everyone went online and searched to find out who the actress was in my case, and everyone knows who it is, but nobody can say. It's just weird.
Yeah.
Well, it creates another layer of impunity for, immunity at least for false accusers, which is really bad because, among other things, the damage that they can do to the accused is just immeasurable. It's significant, it's compelling, it's life impacting in many cases. People get pulled out of their jobs, people get pulled out of their homes, people's marriages are affected, people's psychological health can be affected because you get told you're a monster over and over and over again by people. I mean, that has to have a psychological effect. To
Yeah.
have a group of people, especially people that you trust to be, to protect and serve in your community, looking at you and saying, you're a monster, you're the monster that we have to protect the community from.
Yeah, that's why I described the position I was in as Kafkaesque, because you wake up one morning and you morphed into a cockroach, a monster. You know, the evening before your life is perfectly normal, and you wake up and suddenly you're this sex pervert.
And suddenly you get treated like scum.
Yeah.
And see, I've got a close friend who went through a false accusation ordeal, and his was not so cut and dried. There
Mm.
wasn't video. His accuser gave a time and a date when he could prove he was somewhere else. And the detective investigating the case let her repeatedly change her story before being finally told to drop it because the accuser was somebody that was clearly making things up, and they weren't going to be able to use what she was making up to put anybody in jail. So the case ended up going nowhere, but he was accused by her of numerous different things. At one point, because of our domestic violence laws here, he was taken in for questioning for a drive-by greeting that never happened. And he developed something that, I mean, it's basically post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mm.
It's different in its presentation from what you see with a soldier, but it has sort of some similar, like I've seen soldiers that I've known in my life that won't sit with their backs to a door or a window, that they have to be able to see the entire room they're in and things like that because of what happened to them when they were at war. And there are numerous other things that, little changes in their behaviors in life that, he has changes like that. They're not the same changes, but they're changes that are a response to never knowing that he wasn't at any moment going to have the cops show up and take him to jail again and lock him up overnight and then drag him into court for charges that are ridiculously false. We went through several years of documenting everything he did and everywhere he was, everyone he was with, everything, in order to be able to, at any moment, prove what was going on with him because she made accusations so regularly. And it just, the psychological damage, even with, any of the other things that happened to him, you can say you can get over temporary damage to your job, you can repair your marriage, which you can't always, but at least you have your freedom and things like that. Well, no, the psychological damage takes years to heal, if ever.
Yeah, and you have good weeks and bad weeks. You know, sometimes you feel like you're getting over it, and then suddenly something will hit you again. So I can relate to that totally. I mean, I've had two different courses of therapy. When I was first arrested, I couldn't stop shaking for the first few months, and I mean, I'm shaking now talking about my situation. You know, I don't talk about it that often, but when I do, I start shaking. I don't know how long that'll last. You know, maybe I'll never get over. I don't know. But I feel really bad for people that weren't in my fortunate situation of being able to blatantly prove that I didn't do anything. There's a lot of cases where people, you know, it's not quite so clear cut, and that must be terrible.
Yeah, it is. It's the one guy that I was just talking about. There were people in his life that basically he'd known them for years that just basically abandoned him because of this. They just assumed that because a woman was accusing him, it must be true. People who knew his character knew that was not within his character. Just assumed that because a woman was accusing him, it must be there, and they just missed it. And it's like that's one of the most hurtful things. And then you have the other end of this, like even if we've got maybe some radfem listener that doesn't give a rat's ass about what happens to men. It's like, oh well, throw them under the bus. Who cares? Okay, well, cases like this bog down the system considerably. This case that I'm talking about took 7 years, spanned 2 counties, 2 different jurisdictions, 4 municipalities' police departments were involved in this over the course of this 7 years. And it took place in both criminal and civil court. So this woman cost thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, and tens of thousands of man hours, all over her damseling and false accusations. And I'm certain that in your case, the same thing is true. Maybe not necessarily to the same degree. 2 years isn't 7 years, but it's still the same thing. These guys had to have spent hours and hours digging and looking, trying to find some way to prove this, because a woman was making an accusation. And all of the effort that was put forth in court, all of the time that the jury was away from their jobs, all because this woman decided she wanted to make an accusation. And there's no recourse for that either.
Nope. I was just going to say that the woman who accused Gian Gomeshi, after all of that, Catherine Burrell, she's, still got a job if she wants it. She just basically said, my bad, and that was the end of it. It was just, sorry. This guy almost, went to prison. Probably would have been, he would have been destroyed if he was found guilty. He was lucky to get out of that. And Catherine Burrell's just like, oh, my bad, sorry.
Yeah.
God.
But it does make you wonder how many guys are sitting in prison, haven't done anything, and they're getting large sentences.
Oh, yeah.
We're essentially doing nothing.
I mean, speaking of non-accountability, Emma Sulkowicz, the mattress girl, even though everyone who looks into the allegations surrounding, her situation, if you just take a cursory glance, you can find out that it's a lie. It's not even up for debate. It's a lie. She went back and had sex with a guy again. The whole thing was a stunt. God knows where it came from. God knows, because I don't want to crawl into that mind of hers to try to find out. And even though we know it's all false, she is actually, not only was she able to use that project to graduate, but she got an award. She got the 2016 Woman of Courage Award from the National Organization for Women. So she was rewarded for it. She's famous for this lie that people, for some reason, have accepted as truth.
Yeah, that just makes me sick. But the only way to deal with this situation is to rub feminist noses in it. Feminism is about celebrating false accusations. Look, they gave an award to a false accuser.
Yep. So you came across Erin Pitsey, and she helped you out. She referred you to people, and now you're going to be speaking at the ICMI. I'm curious, how did you get to that point where you did you have some kind of revelation? Was there a lot of did you get introduced to some other world you didn't know existed with
yeah,
that kind of came out of all this?
This is totally new to me. This is another world from my usual art world. And because Erin had helped, she encouraged me to publicize my case, and she asked me to speak at this conference, and I couldn't say no, and I've never done anything like this before, so I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm letting myself in for, but I'm going to try. If it helps the cause of what's happening, I'll do it.
Yeah, that's kind of how we all arrived here in where we had something bring us in, make us more aware, and put us to a point where we were seeking other people, or other people were seeking us out over these issues. And I don't think any of us are experts at activism, It's just something that we do. But then again, I think it being just something that we do is what really makes us activists.
Mm.
We're not doing it to be activists, we're doing it because it's important to us.
Mm.
So I think you'll fit right in.
But you guys, you know a lot more than I do about this area. You know, you've been doing it for a lot longer than I have. So in some respects, I feel a bit of a fake because you know, I've just been shoved into this position of being a speaker. But
Hmm.
I think it's good to get a story from a different angle. Maybe somebody that's not in this arena normally. Maybe that's interesting for people. I don't know.
Well, and it's very, very important for men's experiences of being falsely accused to be put into the public arena,
Mm.
because people treat it like it's not a big deal. Like it doesn't change your life, it doesn't do any damage, it doesn't affect your ability to continue to go on like you normally would, do your job, interact with your family, your community and stuff like that. People just ignore those things, or they just assume that once it's over, and that during the ordeal it's just a cut and dried thing because of uh, the way the legal system works.
Mm.
They have no idea what men actually go through in a false accusation circumstance.
And I think that's partly because most guys just want to get on with their lives. They don't really want to talk about it. They don't want to publicize it because it just makes it worse usually. I mean, as I
Yeah.
said, my situation was slightly different in that it would make it better if the more I talk about it, the more I publicize it, the more it's helping me. So it's different in that respect.
Yeah, anytime that it's kind of gray, where it's there's any room at all for doubt, the tendency in society is for that doubt to be against the guy.
Yeah.
And that's something that, feminists will disagree with that. They say we live in a rape culture and so on, where there's this great tolerance for sexual violence against women. But cases like yours show that society generally bends over backwards to believe the woman and condemn the man,
Mm.
even to the point where it being obvious that she lied doesn't change it.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that in my case, the fact that it actually went to trial kind of slants it because the general public assume that if something goes as far as going to trial, there must be something in there. You know, there's no smoke without fire kind of attitude. They would assume that the CPS in Britain would not take something to trial if if it didn't have to go to trial. You know, they're supposed to only prosecute people if it's in the public interest, but you know, in my case, that was obviously not done.
People who believe that there's the adage, there's no where there's smoke, there's fire, have never been around or close to somebody, I should say, with borderline personality disorder. There can be all kinds of smoke with that, with not one fire, at least not until the person sets one.
Mark, without giving anything away, do you know what you're going to talk about in general at the ICMI?
I think I'm going to wing it, to be honest. I've never done anything like this before, so
Okay.
I'm very nervous, obviously. But
Well, we'll be there,
yeah,
so
would
I don't know
seem.
if that means it's going to be worse. We're going to be judging you silently. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. We're not
Uh,
going.
Actually, one thing that you can do, you might consider the idea of taking questions from people during your allotted time. If you're not certain what to say about your situation, sometimes just taking a few questions can trigger you to talk about specific experiences. But it might be a good idea to also write down a few notes about what happened to you, how it affected you, how it affected the people around you, and how that's differed maybe from what you've seen happen to other people that have made the news, or other people who've been around you that's been in a situation like this.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a TV program made at the moment where it's in talks at the moment, so it's not definite. But I've been speaking to other people who've gone through similar situations. There's a Facebook page that it's a closed group, so people can talk quite openly on there without other people seeing. And I've made some very good contacts from that.
Well,
So
that's good.
yeah, it would be good if we can get this TV program on the go.
Yeah, anything that would draw attention to the problem would definitely, and like I said, getting your story out there, men who've been through something like this, getting their story out there, that's basically what it's going to take to get people aware of the nature and the scope of this problem.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think most people know my story, but I just want to get other stories, saying this is not just me, this is happening to hundreds. The group that I joined, when I first joined, there were less than 100 people on there, and now there's over 300. It's really shot up.
Oh,
So
I
it's,
think that's a fantastic idea. There's probably like these are all people who have been in similar situations as yours?
yeah, well, they're either guys that it's happened to or their relatives. It's often wives because their partners are in prison or they're awaiting trial. So I was just shocked at how many people this is happening to. It's like an epidemic.
Yeah, it
Well,
is.
yeah, I mean, like when it's not to throw women under the bus, but when you have a system set up to where there is no accountability for making a false accusation, you're going to increase false accusations, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just if they did it with men, that would likely increase on their end as well. There has to be some accountability. And a false accusation is not the same as, let's say, finding someone innocent. I think that you can find like some area that's sort of where it's not zero sum, where either the accused suffers consequences or the accuser suffers consequences, but rather something where when you discover that the person who made the accusation was doing so because they were lying and they wanted to ruin the other person in some way, or they were trying to sometimes they do it to avoid embarrassment about something else, or because they have buyer's remorse or whatever. There should be a consequence to that, and when there isn't, you're going to increase the frequency of the occurrences.
Mm. It's often
So
used in divorce cases as well to get custody of the kids or the
yeah,
house.
or more money or whatever. Absolutely,
Well,
along
in
with
Britain,
adultery.
yeah, I don't know what it's like in America, but the so-called victims get compensation regardless of what the verdict is. So there's a financial incentive to make these accusations now in Britain, and I think word's got round. And when I was in court, when I was sitting in the box with the guard sat next to me, she said there's been a big increase in these cases because women know they can get money.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually something that's going on here in the United States too, and it differs from state to state partly because state laws governing things like restraining orders to keep someone away from someone, protection orders basically for anybody's where the terminology restraining order doesn't get used. In some states, just filing a protection order against a guy uh, entitles you to some compensation from him. And then if you're living with him, even if the place that you're living in is owned by him or it's leased in his name or rented in his name and your name's not on it, if you're female, you get a protection order, you can actually kick him out. And because you have a protection order, it's considered aggression against you if he stops paying the rent or the mortgage. So you basically end up with a rent-free place to live at his expense because of that. So and it's not every state that does that, but there are states that do that. There are states that as soon as a guy is under a restraining order, like the first uh, opportunity, the woman who's accused him will call the cops and say that he, was in her neighborhood, or that he called her from, that she'd gotten evidence that he'd called her from his home or from a payphone or something like that. And there's even been instances of women using those restraining orders to like stalk the guy, and they'll go to his workplace and then they'll get him arrested because he's there when she's there and things like that. And I've been writing about this for a while, and I my first entry on my original blog Breaking the Glasses, which is a blogspot blog, was about that behavior and restraining order abuse, malicious prosecution, and vexatious litigation as part of these types of cases. And the reason I was writing about it was because the one guy I was just talking about earlier, his case was a case where domestic violence accusations and rape accusations were used as part of a custody battle. And it's, somebody in the chat is asking, do you think these kind of people communicate by using smoke signals? No. Their lawyers are telling them to do it. Their friends are telling them to do it. There are a lot of women out there that you break up with a guy and either your relationship was contentious or they think you might go back, or there was domestic abuse going on where it was two-way abuse and guys used to hit each other or whatever. And the first thing that they do, well, you should get a restraining order just in case. Just in case. And my blog, the most often used search term by which people find my blog is, what to do if somebody has a restraining order against them and contacts them. So somebody has basically told the government that they're terrified of him. He can't have him around me. I want the government's strength telling him to stay away from me, but I'm going to contact him? How crazy is that? And I've had search terms that are real crazy sauce. I have a restraining order against my ex. How do I make him talk to me? Was to paraphrase one of them. Can I use a restraining order to get custody of my kids? Sometimes it's flat out blatant. Can I use a restraining order to get the house? And it's just like, really, this is what people are doing with our legal system. And because there are no checks and balances, there is no means, there's no recourse for a guy unless the woman doing this to him does it so much that he can approach it from a vexatious litigation standpoint, like my friend did. He's pretty much screwed.
Someone in the chat, Faith is the abdication of reason, I believe his name is, said that false accusations should be considered perjury at least. And I looked up what the penalty for perjury is. According to this criminaldefenselawyer.com website, persons convicted of perjury under federal law may face up to 5 years in prison and fines. Does that sound fair, or do you think it should be more severe?
Well, some people have argued that the perjurer or the liar should get the same sentence that the accusee would have got if they'd been convicted. So I don't know. I mean, you have to question the mental health of some people that make these accusations. So
I do, especially in your case. I wonder, because this is, again, I'm trying to get into the head of this woman that made this accusation.
I've been doing the last 2 years.
I don't know why she would do that if nothing took place. Or if maybe she thought something did take place and she felt that someone needed to be punished, and the only person she could pick out was you, and it was completely random, and she just made an assumption. Maybe she didn't, like your face or something. I don't know.
But as I said, she didn't actually pick me out. It was the police that picked me out from the CCTV.
So she claimed that something happened, and then the police looked at the footage, and they determined, based on what they had, that you were the best option. Wow.
Because
it could be that nothing happened.
Yeah, well, I think
not just that.
I don't think it was possible for what she said to have happened.
No.
Logistically, you can't do what she said.
What Anna was talking about the other day about pathological liars, and it is hard to get into somebody's head with just one act. So, I'm not saying that she's a pathological liar. So don't get me wrong here. But what she was saying about pathological liars applies here, where they can convince themselves of a lie as if it is true. And the particularly good pathological liar will convince themselves to the point where they don't have tells that, you can see that they're lying, because in their mind they're not. And there are situations where, women who have been in this environment where feminists are constantly saying women are in danger all the time, women have to worry about being raped in everywhere they go, in places that you travel, and places that you're in public, and so on. Don't go down dark alleys, don't walk at night, and all that, when it's really men that are usually in more danger out in public because they're more likely to get attacked. But because there's this environment that these stories get a lot of attention, and they're expected to be told. If somebody does have a tendency to sensationalize or to make stuff up or to attention seek, that way, this would be the kind of thing that would come out of that. And it would be very easy for somebody under that circumstance to bump into somebody in the hallway and over the next several hours convince themselves that that bump was, this big thing, this big story, and that that person was bigger and taller, and that they had actually been malicious and, did all these things. That's not actually a hard thing to happen to a person if they're susceptible to that, or if they've got, something psychologically wrong with them where they do those things. But it's really hard to attribute that in a situation like this because, like I said, we have one incident on which to judge. We have no idea whether, what else was going on in her life that day. We don't know, if she was jet lagged. We don't know if she had taken medication for air sickness or train sickness or whatever. We don't know anything, and so, like, I don't want to specifically judge, but at the same time, there definitely should be consequences for pursuing false accusations. And it's not like there shouldn't that it would be hard to do that. There are laws against lying to the police during an investigation. There are laws against filing a false charge. There are laws against committing perjury in court. So all three of those can be enforced in these cases the same way you would enforce any other law. You gather evidence, and if you can prove you have enough evidence to prove a case or to bring a case to trial, you bring it to trial. And if you prove the person guilty, they're convicted.
But it very rarely happens.
No, no, they don't go after anybody that makes false accusations for, either sexual or intimate partner violence. Very rare.
Hmm. Well, Mark, is there anything that you, I don't know if you've looked into the other speakers at the ICMI or any of the topics that are going to be coming up? Are you aware of what's going to be going on there besides you and Aaron's bit?
The speaker list. There's one guy, another British guy, Martin Daubney, who I admire very much. He's on TV a lot over here, and he speaks up for the underdog, really. He's
Yeah,
going to be. I'm not sure what his subject is at the conference, but I actually went to the same school as him. I don't think he knows that, but
that's crazy.
he did me a favor because he rang me after I did the first TV interview, and he didn't want anything in particular. He just wanted to ring me to check that I was okay, which was very nice because most people that contacted me wanted something, but in his case, he just wanted to find out if I was okay. So,
Hmm.
and I thanked him for that. It's what I needed at the time.
Are there any? Is that the speaker that you're looking forward to most seeing at the conference?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of looking forward to meeting Milo, but obviously he's not going to be there now.
I know. That's all right. We got lots of other great speakers. So, and I don't know if you know, but we're having a pub crawl, I believe.
I'll be there.
Oh, good, good, good. It should be, I believe, after. And if you want to kind of get an idea of like, do you know where we are? You in London?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I don't know that area. I'm not familiar with the Excel Center area. So.
Okay, okay. Well, if you want to, Mike has a video on his channel where he does a little bit of a tour of the area, I believe. Right, Mike? Did you find any scope out any spots?
Yeah, it's nothing you can't figure out on Google Street View yourself. But yeah, I went and did it myself.
Well, there you go. So yeah, I don't. I guess is there anything that
We're meeting by the statue with the big feet, I've heard.
That's right, the statue with the big feet.
I couldn't find the statue with the big feet. I just found the statue with the three normal dudes.
Well, we'll figure it out. But yeah, well, it'll either be if Allison knows where the big feet are at, we'll go there. Otherwise, we'll just go where the three normal dudes are, which is maybe that's easier to find if Mike found it. It was close to the SX.
So essentially,
XL thing.
Essentially, win or lose, the epic quest to find that statue will end in defeat.
Yes, it'll end in defeat. Yes, that's right. Yes.
Have you ever tried to defeat a statue? Really hard. Way harder than decapitating it.
It's true.
Well, if you know that your American television literature, a 7-year-old can do that. So.
I think ISIS has defeated a few statues, but not in London. Anyway, Mark, are there any questions that you have for us, or anything that you wanted to say before I close us out?
Can I go to bed now?
Yeah, I know it's late. I want to thank you for taking the time to come out and stay up this late show.
I've thoroughly enjoyed.
And also, thanks for your patience while we were trying to figure out how to get you on.
Yeah, sorry about that. My bad, I think.
No, something about Mac computers I don't understand. They just Safari and does not like Google. It just doesn't like Google Hangouts. But we got to figure it out.
Maybe they're smarter. Maybe they don't trust Google. Maybe they're smarter.
Maybe. But now that we have it figured out, we can probably get you back on sometime when we do another show about false accusations or any like cases that come up. And maybe as you sort of, now that you're just becoming introduced to this world of men's issues, maybe you'll want to, come back on or watch us or whatever, and you can use Google to do it.
Yeah, once I've worked out the technology.
That's right. It wasn't a problem. All right, and I want to thank Mike and Hannah for coming on, and I want to thank you guys for coming and listening. So thank you for coming to see the Honey Badger Radio this Thursday. And next Thursday we will be in London. So we may do a show from there. It's hard to say at this point as far as our Thursday show goes, but we will keep you posted with developments as they develop. So, and this is Honey Badger Radio.